Welcome.
Thank you, Daniel.
Take it away.
Okay. Who am I? I bet I'm not the only one who asks that question. Maybe a few times a day, maybe a few times in your life. Well, the question is who is your identity? What is your identity? And the real question is do we define our identities, or do we let our identities define us? And for example, throughout our lives, I think all of us have various labels that are attached to us. In my case, I'm a daughter. I was a granddaughter. I'm a sister. I'm a friend. I was a girlfriend. I became a wife. I then became a lawyer and a mother and an ex-wife and a second wife, a stepmom, and an empty nester. See, all of these identities, most of them are pretty easy to figure out what they are. It's pretty easy to figure out, what is a sister? Maybe your relationship with a sister is not the best, or it may be fantastic, but you know what a sister is. And you sort of know the role, and you know the role of being a friend and a wife. But one of the most troubling roles, because most women don't know what to do with it when they get there, is the role of and the identity of empty nester. You see, the specter of the empty nest loomed very large for me in my life, so I'm going to tell you a story. It was September 1976. I grew up in New Jersey, and my sister Jane, who is older than me, was going off to college. So on that beautiful September morning, the car was packed with all of her stuff. Her luggage was in the car, and all of her stuff was there, and my parents were going to take her off to her college in New York. It was her first choice school. Everybody was really excited. And so we hugged goodbye, and off she went to college. Now, I was sad to see her go, and I was frankly a little jealous. For some stupid reason, I was always in a big old hurry to grow up. Don't know why. But anyway, it was a beautiful day, and I went off to high school, not really giving it a second thought. And that night, my parents came home and told me all about moving my sister into college, and everything seemed just perfectly fine. And the next morning, I got up to go to school, and my mother was not up. Now, my mother would either wake me up in the morning or she'd be up before me, so this was a little unusual, and I went into her room, and she was still in bed. She said she wasn't feeling well. Well, I wasn't particularly alarmed because my mother, frankly, wasn't feeling well a lot of my life. In fact, I always joked that I don't remember a day in my life that my mother was really particularly feeling great or healthy. And my mother's going to be 90 in April. So anyway, I thought, okay, Mom's probably got one of her sick headaches, and just went off to school, did my thing, went to high school, and my mother was a stay-at-home mom. So when I got off the bus that afternoon, my mother wasn't at the bus stop. She usually would be at the bus stop, and so that was a little odd. So I walked home, no big deal, and I walk in the house, and the house is empty and quiet. So I go up the stairs, go to my mom's room, and there she is, still in bed, still under the covers, still in her nightgown, still saying she wasn't feeling well. Okay, well, I guess she's still not feeling well, and maybe she'll be fine in the morning. And, I went and did my homework and made dinner for me and my dad and really went to bed. Well, the next morning, my mother was still in bed. In fact, my mother didn't get out of bed for 6 weeks. For 6 weeks, my world was turned upside down. I was terrified that my mother was dying. She kept complaining of these vague symptoms of being unwell and tingling and all kinds of vague things. For 6 weeks, I had to do the housework. I had to do the dinner, make all the meals. I had to take care of everything. But that wasn't the worst of it. The worst of it was my fear that what was happening to my mother You know, she'd been ill before, but she never went to bed for 6 weeks, not even 6 days. And not to mention the fact that it was starting to get embarrassing because at school, other mothers would ask me, so where's your mom? We haven't seen her lately. And of course, I had to make excuses for mom because I wasn't going to tell anybody that mom was in bed and hadn't been out of bed for weeks. So finally, at the end of 6 weeks, my father and I convinced my mother to go to the doctor. You know, you would have thought that we would have done that a lot sooner, but for whatever reason, my mother was unwilling to get out of bed to go to the doctor. So I remember that day really well because I was with her in the examining room. And my mother was acting like a child. You know, the doctor would say, you know, put out your arm so I can take your blood pressure. And my mother was just fighting the whole way. And I was looking at her like, wow, this is so weird. And finally, I was so frustrated that I said, Mom, stop it. Do what the doctor says. I yelled at my mother because she was acting like a baby. Well, we realized why my mother wasn't cooperating a few days later when we learned that there wasn't anything physically wrong with my mother. And I think my mother wasn't cooperating because she knew that there wasn't anything physically wrong with her. Truth was that she was suffering from empty nest syndrome. Okay, not for nothing, I was still at home, but my sister had left for college. And my mother sunk into a deep depression. So of course, once we realized there was nothing physically wrong with her, there was no reason for my mother to stay in bed any longer. So she got out of bed, and she sunk into this deep depression. And that winter, in the winter of 1977, I came home from school one day, and my mother was sitting in our family room, looking out the window. No, hi, Julie, how are you? How was your day? What's new? No. Looking out the window. In fact, she didn't talk to me for a couple of days. There was nothing I could do to get a word out of her. And I remember one of those days coming there and seeing her staring out the window, and that's when I made a vow to myself. I said, number one, I will never be a stay-at-home mom, because in my mind, being a stay-at-home mom meant this is what happens to you when your kids leave for college. And my second vow was, I will never treat my children the way she's treating me, and I will never do what she's doing. So fast forward, I graduate from high school, I go to college. By the way, she didn't go to bed when I went to college. Don't know why, never asked, didn't have the courage to ask, but just saying. She apparently got over that really fast. Anyway, went to college. Hated the Northeast because I hate winter. I'm actually freezing right now in my little dress. Decided I wanted to go to law school, and as soon as I got into the University of Miami Law School, off I went to the palm trees and to South Florida. And in my second year of law school, after having met a law school classmate, I got married at the end of my second year of law school. And after I graduated from law school, I became a lawyer, and then I got pregnant. I was so excited because, you see, I had 3 simple goals in my life. 3 goals. Number 1, I wanted to be a wife. Number 2, I wanted to be a lawyer. And number 3, I wanted to be a mother. Not necessarily in that order, but that's how it all happened. And so on February 8th, 1988, my beautiful son, Jonathan, was born. I was so excited. If any of you in the room are a parent, you know the feeling when that child is born. There is a love that you feel that is indescribable. And I will never, obviously, forget that day. I was so excited because now finally I was a mom. So I had achieved that 3rd goal, and I couldn't have been happier. And then surprise, surprise, 20 months later, my miraculous son Michael was born. And why do I call him miraculous? Well, I truly believe that God gave us Michael unexpectedly 20 months later to soften the blow of the news we were about to learn about Jonathan. You see, Jonathan wasn't developing typically. I never babysat when I was a teenager, so I really didn't know what it was like. It was my first child. I thought he was brilliant. You know, my son Jonathan had, instead of pointing at things that he wanted, he would take my hand and put it on it. I thought, wow, he's come up with a new way to designate things. That's pretty cool. And then, I don't know if any of you remember the old See and Say toy, where you'd pull the string and the dial would go around and it would, end up on like cow and it would moo. Well, my son Jonathan had a better way of playing with the See and Say toy. He'd pull the string, he'd turn it over, and he'd watch it spin. What did I know? But then we really became concerned when Michael was born because he didn't seem to react to him like he was a person. It was as if it was an object. And it was very, very concerning. And he wasn't talking, and he was extraordinarily fussy. So we took him for testing. And on February 4th, 1990, 4 days before Jonathan's second birthday, we learned that Jonathan is autistic. And I always say that on February 4th, 1990, my son Jonathan died that day, because all the hopes and dreams that I had amassed over the almost 2 years of his life died that day. And my son Jonathan was born that day, because now I had to start from scratch with new hopes and a lot of fears. But thankfully, a couple of years later, my beautiful son Benjamin was born on June 12th, 1992, and he and Michael, thank God, were typically developing children. Life in our house was beyond difficult. Our house was ruled by autism, and if any of you have autistic children or have relatives with autism, you probably understand that we couldn't do anything as a regular family. Everything in our life was governed by Jonathan and his behavior and what could we do. So we couldn't go to the movies, we couldn't go to restaurants, we couldn't travel, we couldn't do anything that regular families did. We couldn't invite people over to our house unless they had a child with autism, because my son didn't wear clothes or he was apt to paint his feces at any given moment. So it was very, very difficult. Those years were very hard. And along the way, I got divorced in 2005. And I got remarried in 2007. My wonderful husband, Mark, is right here filming me right now. And he's been a wonderful husband, stepdad, and has really been great with Jonathan. But fast forward to 2008, Jonathan's 20 now, and we knew by now that he was never going to be able to live independently, and we had to find a place for him. And the group homes in Miami were really bad. And so, thankfully, we found a fabulous place for him called the Stewart Home School. It's in Frankfort, Kentucky, and it's an institution that's lifelong learning for people with developmental disabilities. So in June 2008, Jonathan went to the Stewart Home School. So my first child left the nest. But was I sad? A little bit. But I was so happy for him that we found an extraordinary place for him where he remains today. But my nest was beginning to empty, and just so happens that in June 2008, Michael graduated from high school. So I knew that in August he was going off to college. So that summer, for the first time as a mother, for the first time in our life as a family, we got to do things that regular families did. For the first time in my life, I finally got to know what it was like to just be regular family. So we traveled to Europe. We did things like go to the movies, go to restaurants, do all the things that we couldn't have done for the past 20 years. And it was wonderful. It was magical. And then in August, I took Michael to college. And I was very excited for him because he's brilliant. In fact, he lives in Israel now. But he was going to his first choice school, And I finally got to take a kid to college. That was so exciting for me. I got to take a kid to college. So while I was sad and I cried all the way home after I left him there, I still had Benji at home. So I still had a child there. My nest was not empty. So for the next 2 years, I was busy taking him to his concerts, to his band practices, to helping him with his homework, all of the things that you do with your high school age student. And then all of a sudden, it was June 2010, Benji's high school graduation. It was in this beautiful theater in downtown Miami. I was there with my son, Michael. And the music starts playing, and the students start processing down the aisle, and all of a sudden, at the top of the aisle, was my son, Benji, in his white cap and gown. And I looked at him, and I started sobbing uncontrollably because I was looking at him thinking, oh my God, what happened? Where did those years go? This can't be happening to me. This is some kind of cruel joke. I thought I had you all for my whole life, and now you're graduating from high school? It's like, I need more time. So I collapsed into Michael's arms in a sobbing, heaving mess. Poor Michael. It's like, Mom, please get it together. Now, I was really proud of Benji, and I was so excited for him. But it was so sad for me. So I held my breath for the summer of 2010, knowing that my nest was going to be empty. And sure enough, I took Michael to college, and then I took Benji to college. And I was very sad when I left Benji because I was so proud of him too. It was so exciting to take him to college, but I knew what I was going to find when I got home, and sure enough, I get home. Next slide, please. And my house was clean. And my house was quiet. And I missed the mess. I never thought I'd miss the mess, but I missed the mess. And I was sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, there's no boys bickering. There's no socks all over the floor. What am I going to do? And then I looked in the mirror and I said, who am I? For the past now 20 years, 22 years, I'd been either Jonathan, Michael, or Benji's mom. That was my identity. I was so-and-so's mom. Who was I? Yes, I was a lawyer. I had a full-time job, but really, who was I? So I looked in the mirror, and I didn't like what I saw. I saw an old woman who didn't know who she was and what she was going to do. And I remembered the vow I made to myself back in 1977. And I knew I had a choice. I could get in bed, go curl up in the fetal position, eat bonbons and cry, or I could take advantage of the opportunity I had in front of me. I had no more excuses. I didn't have to take my kids to school in the morning or to the train or do any of that stuff. Now I had this wide open space in front of me. What was I going to do with the rest of my life? I had the rest of my life in front of me. So I decided, next slide, please, to buy a pair of red patent leather shoes. Okay, these are yellow shoes in the slide, but I always wore black and brown. My palette was black and brown. I thought, oh, I'm going to buy a pair of red patent leather high heels, and I wore them to work. And everybody's looking at my shoes like, wow, cool shoes. So I went crazy. I started buying all these crazy colored shoes. And then I decided, hey, I'm not going to wear black and brown anymore. And as you can see, changed my palette, but I realized the transformational power of color. It's truly remarkable what it can do to your spirit, to how you feel about yourself. And then I thought, what else am I going to do? And I took up pottery. I always wanted to put my hands in clay, even though I always did really badly in art class, but it was so amazing, it was so therapeutic to start creating things with clay. And then I looked in the mirror again and I realized I just kind of let myself go. I was really out of shape. So I had no excuse not to go to the gym. So I started going to the gym. And then I decided on my bucket list, next slide please. On my bucket list was I wanted to run a half marathon. So I signed up for this training course in Miami. Didn't know whether I could do it because I'd only run 3 miles in my entire life at a time. And in January 2017, I ran my first Miami half marathon. And I did it again in January 2018. And I run 10Ks in the US, in Budapest, in Tel Aviv, and in fact, next Friday, I'm running the Tel Aviv 10K as part of the Tel Aviv Marathon series. So what did I learn? I learned that the empty nest is an opportunity for transformation. The empty nest doesn't have to be a time for sadness. It doesn't have to be a time to grieve. Life is a gift. None of us knows how much time we have left. But I believe that we have an obligation to honor that gift and to make the most of the time we have in whatever way we can. For me personally, transformation was because of my mother and because of the example that she set for me, and I knew I didn't want to follow that example. So I had my own personal motivator to do it. But it's not easy to do. Trust me, grieving when your children leave and having that craft a whole new identity for yourself is very, very difficult. But it can be done. And it is easy to give up, because if any of you have ever decided, oh, I'm going to start working out. I've never worked out before, but I'm going to the gym today, and I'm going to do 50 squats. And the next day, you can't sit down. And it's like, oh, I don't think I'm going to go back there again, because that makes me feel really bad. So you need somebody to help you, to push you, to support you in whatever way that you want to make the rest of your life a meaningful, fantastic life. And that's why I created the Fit and Fabulous with Coach Julie program, because I truly believe that we all need help to make our life the best possible. Whatever being fit means to you, mentally, physically, whatever being fabulous means to you, to have that support, to transform yourself, because we are all, in a way, next slide, please. Oh, it's the last slide, okay. We're all, in a way, in a cocoon of all the labels, of all the identities that we have worn our whole life. And we have the opportunity to break through, to transform from a caterpillar into a butterfly, so that we can all rock the second half of our lives, whatever that means for any one of us. And so I feel that it's my purpose in life, and what I've learned through this whole process, from childhood, teenagerhood, motherhood, and now empty nesterhood, that you're never too old to start again. You're never too old to reclaim your identity and redefine yourself. And we really must live our lives the best way we can. And I'm here to help you. And if you want more information on Fit and Fabulous with Coach Julie, please come see me at my booth after this show. Thank you so much for your attention.